Okay, I've been asked recently to do some videos on special effects with Blender. Now I've been asked to do trails of different types behind objects basically. So let's make a start on that. First of all, I'm not going to launch into particle systems and things like that because there's a much more interesting way of doing this. Particle systems don't allow you to do a lot of things. One of my favourite parts of Blender is the cloth simulator, and that allows you to do an amazing number of things. So let me just show you one thing that you can do with the cloth simulator that will produce a wonderful mysterious trail behind an object. So we're going to start off with our object, and that's only going to be a cube, I'm afraid. Nothing really strange about that, but we'll put a nice material on it. So we'll use the default cube, and I'll make a nice sort of coppery material to go on there. It's just all going to be done with the texture. And it's going to be an image texture. And I'm going to open it up, and it's in my 3D directory, and I believe it's called copper. Easy as that. And that's what it looks like. It's a sheet of copper with lots of scratches and odds and ends on it. So since it's a cube, I'm going to give it a cubic projection. Coordinates generated is fine. Color 1, give it maybe 1.6 or something on there. And if we go back, we'll look at it as a cube, and you can see it looks a bit like that. That's absolutely fine. I'll turn up the hardness a bit to make it look a bit more metallic as it whizzes around. There we go. Maybe give it a tiny little bit of a emit so it doesn't quite look out of place in the scene. Not a lot. Okay, and that's it. That's all I'm going to do with the cube material. Quick test render, yeah, that looks the right sort of thing to me. So I'll get rid of that. And I'm going to view it from an exact position. And let's view right. And I want to align my camera with that. Align active camera to view. There we go. And basically what the cube's going to do is it's going to fly across the screen from right to left, I've decided, in kind of an arc, and it's going to drag a trail behind it, and it will be spinning while it does that. So that's all wonderful. So the first thing I want to do is actually, I'll Control Z, get it back in the middle. First thing I want to do is move the cube to another layer because I don't need it for a while. And I'm going to add another cube. Now this cube is going to be the thing that drags our piece of cloth along. Because I don't want it spinning with the cube, otherwise it doesn't look like a trail, it just looks like a spinning piece of cloth. So I'm going to add another cube, and I'm going to scale it right the way down. And this is just going to be like a bar that's going to go through our piece of cloth. Scale it down a bit more. And we're going to make it deep, so it tows our piece of cloth along. And let's get view selected. And what I want to do is I want to make it kind of dumbbell shape. But it has to be wide because I'm going to have two bits of cloth next to each other just to make it nicer looking. So we're going to edit mode, and let's create this kind of dumbbell shape, which is actually very easy to do, he says. do is going to do a loop cut and slide, something like that, something like that, and then I'm just going to scale up these outside two faces. So go to face select, select the face, S for scale, select the face, S for scale. I'm not worried about them both being the same because you're not going to see this piece. This is going to be buried inside the cube. Okay, so materials don't matter, nothing really matters, and it's only really there to act like a clothes hanger, really. So, if we go back into object mode, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn both layers on by shifting and clicking, just to check that this is entirely inside the cube, which it is. I kind of guessed it would be, but it's good to check. Right, now we're back onto our normal layer again. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a plane. Now this plane is going to be what we're going to use for cloth. I'm going to have two of them, but I'm going to duplicate and then play around. So let's add a plane, and if we go up to here, we can set it to 90 degrees in the X direction, so it stands up on end, which is what we want. And I'm going to make it long. How long? Well, let's view camera. Right. We've got everything going the wrong way. That's typical. View top. Let's twist everything around through 90 degrees. And it's R. If you watch my video on shortcut keys, Z. And I can type in 90. Now if I do view camera, what happens? That's what I want. What I want is the cloth sideways on to the camera. Brilliant. That's exactly what I want. And that lets me see just how long I'm going to make it, because I want it pretty much all the way across the scene. So, something like that would do absolutely fine. I'm going to go into edit mode to edit the cloth, not the object. Right, that's better. Get the right thing selected. Edit mode. Go into vertex select. I'm going to select these two front vertices. Because it wants to be kind of a triangle shape, I'm going to scale them down like so. Maybe not quite that far down. And I'm going to scale these two, select these two by shift and right clicking and scale them up. So we've kind of got a triangular comet tail shape, which is absolutely what we want. Now if I go back into object mode, what I'll do is I'll put some kind of material on this just temporarily so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to make it a nice pink colour, and now we can see where our bar is, and we can zoom in on that, because what I want to do is I want to make sure I can make a cutout in this end that's going to fit over that bar, so the bar can tow it along. And something like that would be good. Now with the cloth simulator you need quite a lot of vertices to get a convincing effect. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go back into edit mode and A for select all, and I'm going to subdivide once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and that should be enough for us to play with. And if I come down here I can see that I want to actually, because they're this long, I want a loop in here somewhere, but okay, going to put some loop cuts in. Loop cut and slide, bang. There's the front one. And rather than loop cut and sliding, what I'll do is I'll select that. I'm just going to move this, select that, and then select the shortest path. That will give me all the vertices between those two, much easier than messing about trying to shift and click and play around. Right, that's my other loop cut. It's fine. This wants to be scaled down a bit, but I'll do that in a minute. Go back into face select, and we'll select all these faces, and I believe we can do that most easily using a circular select. Just take that down a bit, chunk, 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 and that's enough. Hit escape to get rid of it, X, delete the faces, and there we have it. We have a piece of cloth with a hole in it. So if we go back into object mode, hit carrier again, and I'm going to scale it down so that it fits in the hole, like that. So there it is, fitting in the hole with a little bit of tolerance all around it. That's exactly what we want. Brilliant. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to add the cloth modifier onto here, because the more work we can do on this before we duplicate it, the less work we have to do. So I click on cloth modifier after clicking on the physics icon, and I'm going to use the silk preset, which is what I always do for this. Don't need to change anything except to turn self collision on. That's absolutely fine. So that's cloth, that's that set up, and we just want, oops, I set up cloth on the wrong thing, I set it up on the cube. That's no good at all. Delete that by pressing the X, go back to the plane, which is what we wanted to set cloth modifiers on, silk again, gosh, it's actually remembered everything, I hope. No, self collision. Okay, and that should be that. Now we'll select this object here, and we want to enable collision on it, so we'll drag the cloth along, so that's fine. Drop the inner down a little bit. These affect the cloth collision. I haven't played around too much with these, but what the heck. I just know that if that inner's up too high, then it wants to break its way off this obstacle, so which isn't very good, obviously. Now I'm going to put some material on the cloth, and this is going to be the final material that we use. Now you can have it coloured if you want. What I'm going to go for is just a kind of mysterious light bending effect, I guess is the best way of putting it. So I'm going to take the intensity for both of those right down to 0. I'm going to take transparency, make it ray trace. I'm going to take alpha down to maybe 0.1ish on both there and specular. Index of refraction, not a lot, 1.1, that's fine. Everything else can stay as it is. So that's our material setting for our cloth. For the moment, we might come back and tinker with it later, who knows. And I'm going to call that cloth, or no I won't, I'll call it effect, because it's not really a cloth texture or anything, so I don't call things what they are. We don't need a material on that, so that's absolutely fine. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the cloth, and because it's going to be one on each side, I'm going to move it over. Then I'm going to hit duplicate, which is obviously duplicate it, escape, and use the arrow to move it so it's precise, and something like that will do us fine. We just want a bit of separation from each other, really, maybe a bit more than that, so maybe something like that. Now what we want to do is we want to make the ends of these funny shapes, and the reason for that is that it needs to confuse the eye at the end of the effect. So I'm going to go into edit mode and hit A for select all so I can see everything. It's fine. And what I'm going to do this in reverse. I'm going to deselect everything that I want to keep. So it's probably the easiest thing to do, or is it? Actually no. Let me have a look. Select, checker, deselect. So this is giving us a checkerboard. Yeah, it's easier for me to deselect stuff, I think. A again. So I'm just going to shift and right click on the stuff that I want to get rid of. And this is a nice tip. If you've got a black material you can't see what you're doing, then delete things by deselecting them and then just invert it. So we're going to have various bits and pieces missing on the ends here, just to make it confusing to the eye. That's all, nothing else. Might make it give the whole thing a nice effect as well. Might make it flutter around a bit more. Who knows? Until you try it, you don't know, believe me. Right, so now what we do is go down to select and invert, and you can see what we've selected. So we'll delete the faces, and as you can see we now have some funny shapes. So we'll do the same with the cloth on the other side. Go back into object mode, click on there, edit mode, A for select all so we can see what the heck we're doing, and then we'll deselect some different patterns on this side. And this will just make sure that both sides of this act in a somewhat different way. And that'll do. Select, inverse, X, and get rid of the faces. Not only faces, because only faces would still leave you with all of the vertices and edge lines and all that stuff. You want faces, and then that removes things intelligently. Right, back into object mode, and this is looking reasonable. Now we want to get everything that we've got here into a start position. So I'm going to shift, put my cube back, make sure we've got the whole lot selected in here, hit escape, view, right, so that's our camera view. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start like over here, nearly out of the frame, and down, and that is going to be the start point, and all our objects are going to start down here. So I don't need to set a keyframe on anything apart from the cube. I'll show you for why in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the cube from there to there, and it's going to move in a slight arc. So I'll set a keyframe where I am at the moment, go to the animation tab, insert, and I'm only going to insert location for a moment. We'll deal with the rotation separately in a minute. And here we go. And this is going to be somewhat off the picture, I think. Did what I usually do, and I forgot to move to the end before I did it. Of course, with a keyframe set, it will just jump back to the beginning if you do that, so that's not a very good idea really. Okay, so there we go, and that's where we'll have it. Insert, location. And as you see, if I click and move the cursor around, you can see you've got it moving like so. But what I want is a bulge upwards in the middle, just to add a bit of interest really. So somewhere in the middle, I'm just going to move the cube up, insert a location keyframe, and now, as you can see, moves in a bit of a curve. And you can make it obviously move however the heck you like, not a problem. So that's that. Now we want to think about rotation and what sort of speed we want it spinning at and all the rest of it. So we'll start off with the cube in a interesting angle, something like that, which is fine. Don't worry about the fact you can see this, you won't be able to in a minute. Right, so then I'm going to insert a rotation keyframe there, and now I'm going to go all the way to the end. I'm not going to bother with that middle one at all. I'm just going to go straight to the end, and by the way, you move these things around down here and in the others by using your mouse wheel if you've got a mouse wheel. If not, hard luck. So, and there we are at the end, and I'm going to make it whiz round and round on the Z axis. So it's going to do maybe a complete rotation-ish, maybe a rotation and a bit in the Z axis. On the Y axis, which is going from left to right, I'm going to rotate it a little bit less, and I'm going to leave the X axis completely alone. So now I'll insert rotation. So now if I move it, you'll see it's got quite an interesting rotation. And because we're not going to attach the cloth to it, the trail isn't going to rotate, so it will actually look like a trail. Now, how on earth do we attach it? Okay, as you remember, there is our device for pulling along the cloth, and we're going to add a constraint. And the object constraint we're going to use is called copy location, and the target is of course our original cube. So now if we push this along, you can see that is moving as the cube would have done, but it's not rotating. That's very important. It's not twisting around, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, and it's going to be hidden inside the cube, so we don't need to worry about it. And so we need to set this up. I think we already did it, did we not, as an obstacle? Just double check. Yes, that's on as an obstacle. These are on as cloth, but we haven't baked them yet because we need to add a field. We need to add the wind, because the cloth won't actually react properly without some wind. So we're going to put some wind in the scene, and so we're going to put everything back onto one layer. So I'm going to move the cube onto the layer it was on before, there's everything on that layer now, and I'm going to add in a field now. Just going to add wind, and as you can see the physics panel strength comes up, and that basically is how far the force will actually go. And you can see the direction it's in. Half a rotate, and we will put it something like that. In practice it doesn't actually matter where this goes, because really this sort of indicates a radius around it. So, but I'm going to turn this right the way up, something like 120 or so, something like that anyway. Flow, maybe 5 or 6, and that would be absolutely fine, I think. Anything else I do, I can do it on the cloth. Now there's two more things to set up, and that is we want some kind of a backdrop, because rendering it against Blender's normal sort of horrible grey is going to be rather uninteresting. So let's add a backdrop. I'm going to import images as planes. Now if you haven't got them enabled, go and do it. It's in user preferences, add-ons, go to the search box at the top left, type in image, and you can see you've got it, import, export images as planes. Just tick it and then close the preferences box, and you will find it's now in import images as planes. Now I've got a wallpaper that I'm going to use as a background here, and although you can't see the plane, it's been put in there, as you can see. 90 to tip it up at 90 degrees. Go back to the camera view again. I'm going to scale it, and you can see it's not quite right, so Z needs to be 90 as well. That's better. Keep on scaling until it fills the camera view, and a bit more because it needs to go back. So let's take it back away from the camera, something like that. View camera again. You just scale it up a tiny bit more, and we're there. Now if we go into the material for that, you'll see what it's done is it's given us a material which has actually got the picture on it. So what I want to do, and this seems crazy at first, is turn down the intensity of both of those to 0, and I want to put the emit maybe somewhere around 0.8. We'll have a look in a minute. We'll do a trial render in a minute. So that's the background, and if I move the cube in there somewhere, ooh, we're a bit big, we're a bit small on the cube I think, so I'm going to select the cube, I'm going to scale that up. There, now we can't see what's inside it, which is what we need. If I render that, you can see this is what the whole thing looks like. Now if I look at where the light is coming from, the light is coming from over here somewhere, so we need our sunlight or our spotlight to be coming from this direction up at the top right. This is why I'm doing this trial render, really, to get the lighting sorted out. And at the moment our lighting is there, and it's entirely wrong. Wants to be kind of over there-ish. Going to make it a spotlight. Just twist it round so it's about right. And it's going that way, away from the plane. And that looks kind of about right. Maybe make it 8 or something like that. And The original picture is quite white, so I'm going to leave it white. And let's do a trial render on that. That's much better because now you can see the light on the cube is coming from the same direction as the light on everything else, which makes it look 10 times better. Okay, so are we ready to bake our cloth animation? We are. So, show hide render view. Select one of the pieces of cloth and remember which one you've selected, because in a minute you won't have any idea. And we need to go to the physics panel. Once again, center mouse wheel scrolls everything along. Here's our cloth. We need to save the file first. So I haven't actually saved this yet, and I'll overwrite the one that I was playing around with earlier. That's fine. And we go down to where it says cloth cache, and I'm not going to quite do the full 250 frames. I'm going to do 220. So 220. See there, and all we need to do now is hit bake, and you can see the little number whizzing away. And what that is doing, well, you can see it's caught up with itself. What that is doing is it's telling you what percentage, not which frame it's on, but what percentage of frames. So when it gets to 100, it's there. Now we'll select the other one, and we'll hit bake for that too. As you can see, it's quite quick because really this scene is quite simple. There's not a huge amount in it as far as the cloth simulator is concerned. It's just getting dragged along. So if we go to the camera view, hit play, something like that. And I think the wind isn't affecting it enough. So the way I'm going to fix that, I'm going to do it in the cloth simulator. Cloth field weights down here, and I'm going to turn up the wind, I don't know, maybe 7. Make it 7 times more the effect that it's got at the moment. Free bake, bake it again. I'm not going to bother to do the other one until I know this is right, because if one of them looks right and I change the other one, then that one will look right too, if you know what I mean. And you can see immediately that's a lot better. In fact, it may be a bit too much, so I'm going to go back again. And a lot of Blender is about tiddling around with things like this until you get them right. Maybe 5.5. Free bake, bake. Hit play. And that's better, we've got a bit more life in it. Previously the wind was stretching it all out a little bit too much. In fact, what I might do is set the wind to be different on both pieces of cloth. So if I stop that there, I can select the other piece of cloth, if I can get it. There we go. And free bake. I'm going to set the wind on this one to be 5. That one was 5.5. Bake. And we'll see what they both look like together. And that'll do. Obviously you can play around with other things, you can add turbulence, you can do whatever the heck you like. Now I'm going to do a test render somewhere in the middle of the frame so I can see what it's like. See if we need to adjust any materials, and you can see what we've got. We've got this kind of whooshing effect, if you like, coming out from our cube. Now obviously you could alter the shape of this. You could do it with a tube of cloth and have a different type of thing that pulls it along, a ball maybe. The limits are only your imagination, but for this animation I'm just going to leave it as this because it's nice and simple, and I'm now going to animate it, and I'll come back and I'll show you the finished animation. Right, so I've done that. That took about 10 or 11 minutes to render, so it wasn't too bad. And if we go and play rendered animation, and here it is, a trail of disturbed air following an object. Now obviously there's lots of other things you can do with this. You can make that trail bigger, you can make it smaller, you can make it surround the object like a force field. Loads of things. Really the only limit is your imagination. I'm going to show you one more thing you can do with this exact animation. So I'm going to shut that down. Now if we go back to show hide render view, now I'm going to change the material. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to change the material, and I'm going to give it blue. It's still going to be transparent, but it's not going to be ray traced. It's just going to be Z. It's going to be 0, and that will do. I'm going to make it emit a little bit, maybe that much, so it's got like a glow. You can see already that you can see it. Now if you render it now, it doesn't look too good. For a kick-off it's so transparent you can't see anything, but if we put a texture on there, so we're now going, we're going to put a texture on there. My favourite for this is this Voronoi texture, and show both. We're going to have it affecting the alpha. We're not going to have it affecting the colour, but we are going to have it affecting the emit. So now you've got this strange network of sort of force fieldy type things going on here. If I render that, you can see immediately what that's starting to look like. Now if we play around with the texture a bit, then we can change the size of it, for example, up or down. We can change the contrast level to make it completely opaque and completely transparent in some areas. We can change the brightness of it, so we can have just a little bit of it like that. What does that look like? That looks pretty cool. So now I'm going to re-render the animation. I'm going to add a bit more emit actually, I think, before I do that. We'll see what an emission of 0.9 or so looks like. And that's fun. And the other thing you can do finally is you can actually set the texture coordinates to global. Sometimes that looks really good, sometimes it doesn't. I have a feeling in this case it will. So the coordinates, instead of generated, are global. So this texture is going to act as if it's mapped over the whole world. So the texture will stay still and the object will move through it. A very strange effect sometimes. Now that was even faster to render, and let's have a look and see what we've got. So you can see now we've got a somewhat glowing trail, and if I turn the emit up it will glow more. Totally different effect. You could even put a coloured pattern on the cloth if you wanted to, and do it like that to get some very weird things. what you do is entirely up to you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this short tutorial on how to do special effects using the Cloth Simulator, and I'll do one again with some particles shortly, which would be the way that most people would try showing people about special effects. But really, to be any good, I think you have to do something different. Well, please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you again soon.